Okay, right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to welcome to our first online session. I do hope that there won't be too many of these online sessions throughout the course of this subject, but sometimes it is inevitable. And for those of you who are still traveling, I wish you safe travels. Now, because this is an online session, then what I usually do is I complement the online session with an additional assignment. As some of you may have noticed, in the classroom page or on the classroom page, there is an assignment underneath the class link that that should be sorry. The assignment is a critical review assignment, and it is a group task. A group task. So I want you to make groups of three, and then choose an article and then review it. How you will do that, how will you go about doing that, I will explain later after this morning's discussion. Okay. So this week I'm supposed to give you a brief introduction to coastal planning. I have added some resources, some references on coastal planning and integrated coastal zone management on our classroom page. And to be honest, I'm glad I'm only going to give you an introduction because I'm not exactly well versed in coastal planning. Hence my non-involvement in the coastal planning studio, as you will find out in the future. So there are some things that we need to consider when we discuss about coastal planning. So what are the aspects of coastal planning? What is the context, and some key factors or some key elements to a successful coastal planning. Now, the elements that are key to a successful coastal planning you will find in the integrated coastal zone management resources. I'll just focus on the aspects and the context of coastal planning. As I previously mentioned, that our coast or coastal areas, not just our coast, but coastal areas are generally, hang on, oh, there we are. Our coastal areas are generally a transitional zone, between a water body. So it could be the open ocean, it could be a riverbank, it could be the side of a lake, for example. So and this transitional area presents a very unique, if not challenging, environment for planners, and not only for planners actually, but also for those who happen to inhabit or who happen to live on a coastal area. Take for example, fishermen or fishing villages, pescatorial villages, if you want to get a bit technical. They have adapted to the coastal way of life. Some of their houses, some of their settlements have been built on stilts. For example, um, if you look in places like Balikpapan, and there's a kampung in Brunei that is also on stilts, similar to that found in Balikpapan and Banjarmasin. Then again, Brunei is a part of that big island that we call Kalimantan. So it shares a it has very similar geographical features, and of course not only geographical features but also cultural references and cultural values. So there's the people aspect, there's the environmental aspect, and the geophysical aspects. Um, not all coastal areas are alike. If you compare the northern shores of Java Island, for example, compare the northern shores of Java to the southern shores of Java, you have vastly different characteristics there. The northern coasts of Java um, are generally calmer waves, generally calmer waves. The southern coast, on the other hand, because it is facing directly to the open ocean, then it's more powerful, more violent waves, and um, so thus presenting a different set of challenges to the coastal areas to the north. Now that brings me to context. Um, as we know, there are three different types of water bodies. So riverbanks, lake shores, and then of course the open ocean or the or the beaches, for example. Um, and again, those three contexts vary as well from one country to another. My personal experience with coastal areas in Asia and in Europe, for example, are vastly different. Um, in Europe, well, depending on which part of Europe it is, but if you happen to be in the northern Europe, then in northern Europe, then people uh, when people visit the beaches, people visit water bodies for recreation, but the recreational activity they do in northern Europe is very different to those in Mediterranean Europe. In Mediterranean Europe, it's a lot more similar to what we do on the beaches. So we enjoy the sun, we surf, we swim in the waters. Whereas in Northern Europe, people generally tend to stay out of the water because it can be very uncomfortable, cold. It can be very uncomfortably cold. So again, the way coastal areas are used um, vary from one context to another, um, and that also impacts the way we approach planning coastal areas. Now, the keys to success. I'll give you some clues. The keys to success, or the keys to a successful coastal planning, would be um, would be first and foremost understanding its usage, or understanding the physical qualities, the geophysical qualities of the area, understanding how people use the area, so the cultural context, and then acknowledging and understanding the current challenges that each society face with regards to how they use the coastal areas and what they want to do with it in the future. Now, without a doubt, our coastal and marine areas um, are abundant with a variety of natural resources, right? And well, our natural resources can be divided or can be categorized into two general categories, renewable resources and non-renewables. Renewable resources, fisheries, so fishing and aquaculture, mangroves, coral reefs, whereas non-renewable resources would be petroleum, gas, minerals, and other mining materials. And usually petroleum or oil extraction happen a lot of the times happen offshore, not really in coastal areas, but where oil production and coastal areas come into or interact um, is when they lay pipelines from the from the offshore drilling facility onto the onshore processing facility, depending on how far it is, how far away it is from shore. Now, in addition to providing renewable and non-renewable resources, our coastal areas also have other functions: transportation, port, for the distribution, for the import and export and distribution of goods, um, goods and services. Some of our coastal areas also house or are also home to industrial estates. Some agriculture, agro-industry, of course. Well, I think aquaculture would be more appropriate. Aquaculture and other aquaculture related industries. Some environmental services. When I say environmental services, it's like mangroves and coral reefs. As we know, as some of you may know, mangroves and coral reefs are there not only for decoration, but they do serve a very specific purpose, which is to help reduce, or they become natural barriers for erosion. They help prevent erosion. Coral reefs are usually home to a vast biodiverse environment. So healthy coral reefs help promote healthy biodiversity. And of course, our coastal areas are places for recreation and tourism. And in some cases, our coastal areas are residential areas, and I'm not talking about fishing villages only, but also slum and squatter settlements that you find along riverbanks in general. And because of those settlements or residential areas, unfortunately, some of our coastal areas become waste dumps, and that's one of the things that we try to deal with. We try to raise people's awareness of the water bodies, of the canals, of the rivers, because a lot of the not a lot of the times, but traditionally, the rivers and waterways are like the backyard of our settlements. If I remember, if I remember in East Kalimantan, for example, one of the rural settlements, the houses face away from the rivers, and so because they face away from the rivers, they don't have clear sight lines to the river, and they don't really watch the river. And what they do is And because of that, they tend to ignore it. But on the other hand, their livelihood depends on the riverways, because that's how they get their goods. They transport everything along the river. So mining equipment, food, um, and office equipment and everything. They transport everything using the river, but they also dump their waste in the rivers, and generally not caring. And so what we try to do is when we replan their settlements or plan new settlements, we orient their settlements to the rivers instead. So if if it's like if you don't see it, you forget about it. But since we orient their settlements to the rivers, hopefully that way we can passively increase their awareness to the natural resource that they have in their. It's no longer their backyard; it becomes their front yard now. Okay, now coming into the context or issues associated with coastal planning. Now, there are internal and external issues, of course. Um, internal issues, I would associate that with the individual at the individual level or at the institutional level, where it has something to do with their internal capacity. So when it comes to coastal planning and coastal development, the general internal issues include low levels of resource utilization, um, very low levels of technological and business management capacities, and I find this especially prominent in more rural areas. When you develop or plan coastal areas or any other area for that matter, um, in heavily urbanized places like big cities across Indonesia, then the resource utilization, technological capacity, and business management capacity is basically through the roof. It's like night and day. But when you're in a more rural setting, they will have one or two people who have a good grasp of, who have a good technological capacity, business management capacity. However, um, most of the time, it's not like that. And again, when you come, because again, when you come to the rural areas, or when it comes to the rural areas, it's still a very traditional business approach and subsistence oriented, so day-to-day survival. A lot of the times, again, it's not exclusively a coastal area issue, but um, most rural settlements um, have a way of life that is very subsistence oriented. So a very short-term approach to resource extraction. I just need to feed myself for today and or tomorrow, and so I'm going to extract this much. But they generally don't think too far, as in how can I conserve these resources. It's not always like that, but a lot of the times it is that it is very subsistence oriented. Limited capital, well, that has something to do with the low levels of resource utilization, or due to limited capitals, then they have very low levels of resource utilization because there are no resources, or there are very limited resources available. And the point number 4 is especially is especially evident in our country. Poverty and underdevelopment of coastal communities and fishermen. Um, our fishermen today are still very reliant on traditional fishing boats, and um, their methods of extracting resources from the sea still rely on traditional means, um, and sometimes even bottom trawling, where they expand a large net over a certain area and they drag the net through the seabed, and that causes damage. That causes damage to the seabed and any other organisms that happen to be there. And so that still happens. That still happens a lot here. Um, and so that is something of an issue that we need to resolve. So other than raising awareness of coastal or offshore resources and offshore biodiversity and environment, but also raising awareness to more sustainable practices um, in the extraction of coastal resources. Now, coming to the external issues, there are there are not significantly more external issues, but there are just slightly more external issues than there are internal issues. And so far, our coastal and ocean development policies are more productivity oriented to support economic growth, less in favor of traditional fishermen. And external issue number one has something to do, or internal issue number four has something to do with external issues number one. So they interact with one another. Um, as we know, um, the primary goal of planning seems to be economic growth, economic development. Um, you plan areas, you plan areas for development in order to optimize economic growth. Um, however, the sort of economic growth that a lot of people have in mind are generally not in favor of traditional, not only fishermen but also traditional farmers. And there are, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, um, there are two ways of dealing with that. First, either create policies or formulate policies um, that are in favor not of the traditional means, but create policies that empower traditional fishermen by providing them access to more modern, more adequate, and more sustainable means um, of conducting their fishery practices. Um, Again, issue number two is still policy related. Oh, sorry. Strategy number two, um, policies that empower traditional fishermen, and another way of or another approach to external issue number one is to reorient the overall development, or at least for the coastal areas, reorient the development so that it's not solely in favor of solely supporting economic growth. So economic growth and or environmental sustainability and economic growth. You know, so far, the only thing that can slow down the ambitious economic growth, um, the ambitious economic growth drive is public health. So when COVID hit, everybody stayed at home. Economic growth slowed down, and public health indicators went up slightly, and environmental sustainability or environmental health indicators increased substantially, all because of the economic slowdown. Point number two, or external issue number two, again, still very policy oriented, non-conducive macroeconomic policy or the political economy. Interest rates are still generally pretty high, and a lot of the times there's the absence of credit programs intended for the marine sector. I'm not very well versed in the financial world, but I am only familiar with credit programs for housing, housing and housing development. So, but I believe there should be uh, credit programs for fishermen so that they can access loans to improve their equipment. If there aren't any, then that's definitely an area that needs further improvement. Now, more external issue. Damage to coastal and marine ecosystems due to pollution from land areas, unsustainable fishing practices, either with bombs and chemicals, so explosives and or chemicals, exploitation and destruction of coral reefs, and the use of fishing grounds that are generally not environmentally friendly. Let's have a look at that one by one. Now, the damage to coastal and marine ecosystems due to pollution from land areas. Now, pollution coming from land areas can be due to extensive or very intensive construction practices, for example. Um, the the Brisbane River, for example, before the hinterland was heavily developed or bustling with construction activities, the waterways were a lot clearer than today. And due to the industrial activities and extensive construction, the waterways are a lot murkier than they used to be. And so the waterways are now brown, brown and full of silt. And so they have to dredge. The rivers continually to ensure its continuous flow. So pollution from land areas, industrial activities, construction, they can be very detrimental to coastal and marine ecosystems. Unsustainable fishing practices, explosives, chemicals, at a local scale, at a local or individual scale, that may not be such an issue, but if done massively, then of course that can risk the destruction of marine ecosystems or the disruption of marine ecosystems. Explosives can destroy coral reefs, and the destruction of coral reefs means a threat to the local biodiversity. And sometimes I understand that people like to go fishing, but because of land-based activity pollution or pollution from land areas, some of the fishing grounds that people go to fish become very hazardous, not very environmentally friendly. I know that in one of the industrial estates in East Java, they have several water ponds. People like to go fish in those water ponds, but to be honest, I don't think that the fish that they extract from those water ponds are fit for human consumption, simply because the water ponds are in the industrial estate area. Um, therefore, um, therefore, consumer discretion or should be should be exercised. So extreme caution should be exercised. Now, external issues number four, inadequate legal and institutional systems, weak implementation, low working and corruption-laden bureaucracy. Not all of our areas are like this, but the legal and institutional systems, again, that has something to do with the previous points on the policies. And because of the inadequate legal and institutional systems, they result in weak policies. And generally speaking, weak implementation and weak monitoring and evaluation, what's it called? Practices or processes, then make coastal planning such quite a challenge. For the bureaucracy side, I'm not going to comment too much on that because that's not something that is exclusively coastal. It's not something that is exclusively coastal related. Non-coastal area planning and development are also very bureaucracy heavy processes. And then finally, the behavior of entrepreneurs who, of course, everybody wants to make a profit. However, in the case of coastal areas, there are a lot of intermediary traders and entrepreneurs, like, oh God, I forgot the word. Oh, the word. Hang on, sorry. Is there something wrong? Okay. Intermediary traders, middlemen. Apa ya? Para tengkulak mungkin. Kata yang tepatnya itu tengkulak. So, business-wise or business practice-wise in coastal areas, our fishermen, again, generally suffer a lot because of the way ocean goods are traded. So fishermen usually come ashore with their produce, and then they would go to auctions, tempat pelelangan ikan (TPI). They would go to auction places to auction and sell off their produce, and they don't sell it. Normally they don't sell it directly to customers, but they sell it to middlemen, and the middlemen then sell to customers. And what a lot of coastal development programs have tried to overcome or have tried to fight against is these intermediary traders. So fostering or facilitating direct interaction between fishermen and customers, rather than fishermen third party customer that we generally do right now. And the benefit of having a direct fisherman to customer interaction is, of course, the money goes directly to the fisherman. That's the benefit for the fisherman, and the fisherman can then dictate the price for their own produce. And on the other hand, the customers also pay a much fairer price for the goods that they receive. So intermediary traders is something that we try to minimize or try to get rid of ultimately. Okay, next. Finally, the last external issue. Um, there's a low awareness of the importance and strategic value of integrated management of coastal and marine resources for the progress and prosperity of the nation. Well, of course, I would be a bit more careful in using the word the nation, but let's orient ourselves to the prosperity of the region first. And people still tend to think that, or policymakers still tend to think, uh, still tend to think in sectors. So the the coastal area is a different sector it's a different sector and a separate entity to other sectors like the industrial sector or or the trade sector and everything else. But we need to keep in mind that all of these sectors are heavily connected and interrelated um, because some industries take place in coastal areas. So think of oil extraction, oil refinery, um, even energy generation, power plant, power plants. Some power plants are situated in coastal areas. Remember Fukushima, the nuclear power plant in Japan? That's situated very close to the coastal area. Um, and then our own electric generator, PJB Pembangkit Jawa Bali, in Python. That's situated in coastal areas. So um, we need to bear in mind that a lot of our activities actually take place in coastal areas. So we can't really separate that from one sector to another. So whatever happens on land happens in whatever happens on land usually impacts the coastal areas and vice versa. Um, it's okay if you have it's okay if you get cut out from the Zoom every now and then for those who are traveling. The session recording will be made available as I have done so with the previous session. So don't worry about it. Now, what should we do? Um, what should we do about internal and external issues? Now, I mentioned that the key to coastal management and coastal planning success really depends on the context, really depends on the geographical, the socio-political context, the socio-economic context. But there are at least three factors or three key factors that influence coastal management success. But this is not just coastal management success, however. Um, it's also it also affects other places or other areas as well. So three key factors to coastal management success: cross-sector collaboration, inter-regional collaboration, and cooperation and communication between all actors and or stakeholders. For example, in coastal areas, it's not just the fisheries, it's not just the fishery sectors that play a major or primary role. Other sectors also have a big role because, again, they are interrelated. Um, they are interrelated. The industrial sector and services may become sectors that perhaps have a major contribution in the development of productive businesses of the community. Therefore, boosting the boosting the economy of coastal communities. And issues regarding environmental sustainability is also inseparable from the participation and involvement of the industrial sector, where industrial waste is usually dumped into the water. Um, and of course, and to overcome that, you need the availability of supporting infrastructure, and the availability of supporting infrastructure is also very, very crucial to developing coastal regions and maintaining environmental sustainability. So again, cross-sector cooperation is one of the primary keys to successful coastal management and development. And coming into point number two, inter-regional collaboration. Mm, unlike urban areas, uh, coastal areas cannot be split into administrative segments. In this regard, the areas included along the coastal stretch, um, indicated by the existence of ecological and economical homogeneity. They must cooperate with each other to minimize conflicts of interest. Um, Also, cooperation between regions can perhaps be initiated through the establishment of cooperation forums or communication forums between local governments that share coastal and marine areas, to anticipate the onset of issues that are detrimental to development, such as conflicts between the fishermen and conflict between different administrative regions. So perhaps one strategy or one approach is to come up with an agreement and the establishment of collective norms on the use of local resources, um, in accordance to the spirit or in accordance with the spirit of regional autonomy. And so that should be something that is communicated to the fishing community so that they have the same view. So not only different administrative governments need to communicate, cooperate, and collaborate, but also the general population, so the fishermen, and other non-governmental bodies need to and come together and solve their shared issues and grievances. Um, Now, efforts to reduce, coming into the third point now, efforts to reduce sector and regional inequalities, or sector and regional disparities. It clearly requires a very, very specific strategy for more comprehensive and more sustainable handling. Now, for this reason alone, I think a policy from the central government is needed to bridge the problem of poverty and sectoral and regional equality, especially in coastal areas, through a cooperation mechanism between actors and or stakeholders, and they also need to involve the elements of society like fishing groups, uh, private parties or private fishery entrepreneurs, the private sector, and also the government. Now, only then can the effort to accelerate the development of local economy that involves the participation of the community, um, that it the cooperation between all stakeholders simply mean that okay, um, every party involved um, needs to communicate and needs to collaborate with one another. Hang on. So, um, efforts to reduce poverty and sectoral inequality in the area are used in the area or in coastal areas should be driven by a new paradigm where regional development initiatives are no longer, rolled out from the central government, but are very, very local, very, very regional initiatives. And our current framework of thinking, in the sense of um, regional autonomy, allows for that. So local government or regional communities um, can then uh, initiate efforts to decide the best measures in implementing regional management plans and action plans that are in accordance to everybody's needs and their own capacities. So yeah, cooperation, not not only it shouldn't be top down. It should primarily be bottom up approach and or top down, bottom up, and meeting somewhere in the middle, achieving compromise between all actors and stakeholders. Okay, so yes, please have a look through the week 5 reference folders, the supplementary resources and regulations, and that brings me to the class assignment. Hang on. Mm, Here we are, and back to the course. Okay, but before I talk about the critical review assignment, sorry, do you have any comments or do you have any questions? Do you need further clarification? No? Well, I think we'll just move on. We'll move on to the critical review assignment first. So this assignment, first of all, it complements our online session, and first to complete this assignment, you can follow the steps that I have outlined here. So first of all, form groups of 3 and submit your group list. Daftar pembagian kelompok. Submit that to me. You can again you can send it through through the email that I provided in the chat. And if I could kindly ask you to do that today, that way I can set up the groups in the participants section. And keep in mind that the groups you form today may be the same, maybe it may be consistent until the end of the semester. So choose your teammates wisely. So groups of 3, and then submit the group to me. Access the week 5 reference folder, especially the supplementary resources or supplementary references. Here. So choose one of those resources to review. You can have a look. You can have a look at all of them first before making your choice. Have a look through them, and then write a critical review. Now, the guidelines for the critical review is attached. When you click on the critical review assignment, you will find the guidelines here, Fund 1 critical review, for you to download and read. Now, again, I've enabled the group submission feature in Classroom, so you have to be in a group to submit, but not everyone in the group has to submit. So when you're in a group, and once I've set up the group configuration, then a representative of the group can submit. And that's everybody, and everybody's already included. After you write a critical review, present the results of your review, present the findings to the class on week 6, so next week, and then submit your review report. So what you're submitting to this assignment is not the slides, but it's the review report. If you feel that you need to create a slide deck, a presentation deck for week 6, you're more than welcome to do so. And if you feel that you need to consult with me on your review, if you need to know whether if you're doing the right thing, or if you're going down the right track, then you're more than welcome to come to me to ask for consultation. And the due date is next week at 5 p.m. So the due date for submission is you're going to be presenting in the morning. You can submit your report until 5 p.m. All right. So the critical review guidelines denote what needs to be done, and what are the primary components of a critical review. The reason I'm assigning you this, I'm giving you this assignment, is because some other lecturers also like to give you critical review assignments, and so if you haven't done so already, then this is a good exercise for you too. Okay, any questions?
Ananda, I have a question.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So this class have 8 person, and then you wrote form group of 3, so that means one of us have, so the group are like 3, 3, 2.
Right. That's right.
Is it fine if we divide into 2 groups instead, so each group has 4 members?
Yes.
Or is that too much?
That's okay. No, that's okay.
Okay.
Four members is okay. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Great. So form groups of 4 and submit your group list to me, so that I can set it up in our classroom. So any further questions with regards to the assignment? I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's pretty straightforward. All right, great. I think I might add, no, I don't think I need to add the reflective writing guidelines to this. It's just the critical review guidelines. That should be enough. That should be enough for you to complete this assignment. Alrighty then. If there are no further questions, if you're still having trouble scanning the QR code, you can enter. I think you should be able to enter the. You should be able to enter the code into the presency thing. Otherwise, I can just reflect on the list of participants that are present here, and yeah, I think everyone is here anyway, so it should be fine. Right. If there are no further questions, please feel free to contact me either via email or yeah. I think I prefer the contact through email because it's easier for me to manage rather than WhatsApp because I tend to get hundreds of WhatsApp messages throughout the day, and I'm afraid that I'm going to miss your message by a mile. So emails are a better option for me, a better option of communication for me. Yeah, so feel free to contact me through email to set up an appointment for consultation if you need to consult with me on your assignment and or for anything else for that matter. So if there are no further questions, thank you very much everyone for showing up today and I'm wishing those who are traveling safe travels and until next week. So good morning, have a great day everyone, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, sir.